Hello, all. Today we are going to see about the concept of triggers that we use in PLSQL programming. We have used stored procedures, functions, and cursors, and we saw how to create them and what is their use in case of PLSQL programming. Now, let us see about what is a trigger, and how we can implement trigger in PLSQL program. So, we have up till now uh, we have fired many DML commands like insertion, selection, and updation. But when we fire those commands, definitely, uh, apart from the target table on which those commands are imposed, apart from those tables, that command has implications on many other tables as well. Like, for example, if we have a student database and we update any record of student from the account section, right? So the same updation must be reflected in the library table for that particular student, then again in the department to which the student belongs, so on and so forth. So these sort of uh, actions need to be performed manually. Up till now, we did it manually. So wherever the change has to be reflected, we had to perform that change manually. But here trigger allows us to automate that process. For example, if I delete a record of student from the account section of the college, maybe because the student has left the college. So in that case, we have to perform the same operation on the other tables in which that student's record was present. So we can automate this particular task where we have to perform uh, either insertion, deletion, or updation to particular table. So generally speaking, we can say that a trigger is a special kind of procedure that will start its execution. It will get invoked and it will start its execution automatically if a specified change or a specified event occurs. Now, definitely, these events uh, are considered to be one of the three, that is, insertion into a table, updation to a table, or deletion from a particular table. So these are the events upon which we can have a trigger, which is a special procedure which will get executed. Generally speaking, we have three parts to a trigger. First one is the event part, that is, at what time we have to perform the trigger, that is, at the time of insertion, deletion, updation. And in that, we have uh, three special, sorry, two special forms of that event. So we can say that uh, whether to perform the triggers action before insertion, after insertion, before updation, after updation, and before deleting and after deleting. So these two are the timings, before and after, and the events are insert, delete, and update. So the first of the three parts of trigger is the event which is occurring, right, and the timing of that event. Second part of the trigger definition is the condition, right? So we want the trigger's action to be taken on some specific set of rows. We want the action to be performed for some specific set of rows, right, of the target table. So we can specify that condition in the second part. We'll see in the demo when we'll see a sample code for the trigger as how to define this condition. But again, this second part of condition is optional, and again, if we are using row level triggers, uh, in that case we can define this condition. The third part is the action part. First part is the event, second is the condition, and third is the action which we want to perform on that particular event. So definitely this action part is enclosed in begin and end uh, keywords, which we usually use for defining any stored procedure. Right. So in those uh, two keywords, we have to enclose our action part. So generally speaking, whenever an event like delete, insert, and update occurs, the trigger will get executed and a predefined SQL block will perform the necessary action. And we have to name that block, and that will be the name of the trigger, obviously. So we'll see the syntax quickly, and then we'll see an example. Okay. Okay. So this is the syntax of creating a trigger. So it goes along like this. The create keyword, create or replace. So this or replace part is optional. Uh, if you have the same trigger, now it gives you a provision to replace that trigger. So you have to write while you're creating a trigger, you'll have to write the command create or replace. Fine. So if you are sure that yes, such a trigger already exists, so you can always replace it with an updated version. Fine. So create or replace trigger, the trigger's name. We'll see how the conventionally how to name a trigger. We'll see that. But here comes the trigger's name. Then comes the before or after. So this is the timing at which you are going to execute that trigger, before or after of this event. So if I say that my update trigger should work after a particular updation is done, so what I'll do, I'll write here after update. Fine. Before update, after update, before insert, after insert. Right. Before delete, after delete. Understood this? So when this triggers should get invoked, that we have to specify here. Before the updation, after the updation, before the insertion, after the insertion, so on and so forth. Understood this? So that is the timing and the event, that is insertion, deletion, or updation. Fine. On the table name, on which table you want to impose or you want this trigger to work. So that's the table name. Fine. And then we have a clause uh, for each row. So that brings me to a very important point, that is we have two types of triggers. One is row level trigger and another one is statement level trigger. So what's the basic difference between these two types of triggers is a row level trigger allows us to work on each row of this table that we have specified over here. Understood? Whereas if we take a statement level trigger, uh, it is imposed on the entire the entire table itself, not on the row. So it is a if we have to, generally we use the row level trigger, but if we want to impose any security measure for that table, so what we do, we generally use a check constraint, isn't it? For example, if you want to see whether the roll numbers are in the given range, right? if it's an employee table. So is the whether the salary is not going beyond a particular range. So that is where we impose the check constraint. You all must be knowing about it, right? So you can think of this statement level trigger as an extension of that check constraint. Fine. But the thing is that in case of MySQL, we cannot impose the statement level triggers. That is possible in Oracle databases. Understood? So in our example, this what I have done here is square brackets for this clause for each row means that it is optional, right? Like the same case as I have done for this replace ahead, right? But this is optional in case of Oracle, but in case of MySQL, since we are only having row level triggers in MySQL, this is mandatory for each row. Understood? The next thing is for each row, and then you can filter the rows. As I said earlier, I told that a trigger works in three stages. Understood? First one is the event. So we have specified the event and the timing of the event over here. And then comes the condition part, which is optional, as I told. So this is the condition part again, which is optional. So uh, if we want to specify any condition with which the rows of this table name will get filtered, and this trigger will work upon only those rows, the filtered rows, right? So we can specify that condition over here. For example, in our case, we are going to see an example in which we are going to work upon. If you remember, we had taken a result table in which we had a column of total marks, right? So we are going to work on that table and the total marks column. So if you want that this trigger or its action part should get executed for only those rows whose total marks is less than 40, for example. I mean, for those students who have failed. So in that case, we can specify that condition over here. Total marks less than 40. Understood? So it will consider only those rows whose total marks column is less than 40. I hope you all are following. Understood this? Simple. But again, if you if you see or if you study in depth, you'll get to know that this when clause, which allows us to specify the condition or to filter out the rows. Again, this when clause is available with Oracle databases. We are not allowed to put this when clause in case of MySQL databases. So the only thing that we can specify in this particular statement is for each row in case of MySQL. Understood this? Then how do we filter out the rows then in case of MySQL? So we can put a if statement in the procedure in the action portion of our trigger, and there we can filter out the rows on which we want this trigger to work. Got this? Yes. So this was the second part, the condition part. And then the third part, as I told, is regarding the action. So again, we will have a standard procedure which starts with begin and ends with the keyword end. And between that will be our action part. So whatever we do, suppose I want to insert some record whenever uh, any record from a particular table is being updated. So what I'll do, and suppose I want to do it after the table has got updated. So what I'll specify, after update on XYZ table, for each row perform this, what, insert some maybe some log related thing into the other table. Understood? So whatever action you want to perform when that event occurs, you will specify that in this enclosed in this begin and end keywords. Understood this? Any doubt by far in the syntax? Anyone? Okay. Okay. Uh, there are certain conditions, obviously, which we'll look upon quickly. So here you may see that in update triggers, so as I told, we can have three types of events: update, insert, and delete. So in update triggers, the old keyword refers to rows before it is updated. Understand this thing? Uh, I said that we have to perform certain action, right? So as a part of that action, I I may require to refer to the older values and the new values. Understood? So suppose it is a update trigger. So in that case, I have updated the total marks, for example. So once I have updated, since my trigger is after update, once I have updated the trigger, I will have the new marks entered in my uh, total marks column for certain row, right? So if I have to consider the old value of that column for that particular row, I will use the old keyword with that column name. And if I have to consider the newly entered value or the updated value for that particular row in that particular column, so I will use the new keyword. So things will get much clear when we see the example regarding this. Okay. For now, just remember this thing: when to use old and when to use the new keyword. Understood? Similarly, in insert triggers, we can only use the new keyword. Since we are inserting, we are having no record currently. Once we have inserted, we will obviously have the new value. There's no old value to a newly inserted row. Understood? So that's why in insert triggers, we are going to use the new keyword only if at all it is required. Fine. And similarly, in the delete triggers, we don't have a new version of that row or column of that row. So definitely we can only use the keyword old. We can't use the new keyword over there. So these are the rules to use old and new keyword uh, whenever we require it. Clear? Fine. Okay. So here's an example that we are taking. Read this statement carefully. It says that I have to update the marks column of the result table, or the total marks column, I should put it, because we are having a total marks column. So I have to update the total marks column of the result table, and when I update, I want to keep track of the difference between the old marks and the new marks of the students. Oh, this has come twice. I have to keep track of the difference between the old and new marks of the students who had failed. Understood? So let me quickly take you to the result table. Here it is. So if you are able to see the result table, you will observe that we have a total marks column right in between, and we have marks of students entered into it. So what we do, uh, we have kept a threshold of 40 marks. Above 40 is passed, and below 40 is failed, right? So if I try to update the marks over here of the failed students, then in a particular table, I have to put in the difference between my old marks and my new marks. Understood? So old marks is 20 and new marks whatever it will be, right? So that I have to perform. Okay. So definitely this particular uh, I mean this trigger is going to work for the update statement, or it is an update trigger in short, and it will only work upon those rows which is having total marks less than 40. Fine. So let us look at the trigger over here. Yeah. So obviously it is a row level trigger, and here it goes. So create trigger. I can specify or as well. Create or replace trigger. Now here's what I was talking about: the naming convention uh, of the trigger. How we should name a trigger. So this convention uh, allows us to keep track of whether we are having a update trigger on a particular column, sorry, on a particular table or not. Understood? So that is why it is important to follow this convention. So what it says: after results update. So what it says: after the results table has been updated. So this is the way you have to name it. Suppose I'm writing a trigger for the before timing. So what I'll do: before the results table is updated, you should write it in this way. Or after results table, I mean a row in that is deleted. So I will write after results delete. So I hope you all are following how we have to name the trigger. Okay. Yeah, that is the name of the trigger, and then we have to put the timing and the actual event upon which this trigger should get executed. So after updation, this trigger should get executed on the results table, obviously, for each row. Since we are doing it in MySQL, so we are not allowed to have a statement level trigger. So definitely this clause is mandatory, and we cannot filter out the rows over here. So when, we cannot specify the when subclause over here. So for each row, perform the action which has now begun. So what we are doing, we begin the action part. We declare a variable called as marks difference as marks underscore diff, which is an integer, and we compute the difference between the old marks and the new marks. Right? How do we do that? I told you all, in case of update triggers, we can use the new and the old trigger, old keyword. So this is how it is used. New dot total marks. So when we are observe this very carefully now. Since we are going to perform this particular uh, trigger on each row, it will deal with one row at a time, and in that row, current row, total marks. So the new total marks minus old total marks. Understood this? For that particular row, I am going to concentrate on the total marks column. So it brings me to a single cell, isn't it? So what is the new value into that cell, and what is the old value of that cell? So I'll compute the difference between those two, and the difference will be again stored in my variable marks underscore diff. Understood this? Now here I have made I think since we are not allowed to put the condition here besides my for each row in my where clause, so I'll have to put a if over here. So how it goes, if I'll have to compute the marks difference factor. So if marks underscore diff is if the difference is less than 20, less than or equal to 20, then, because you know that how much grace marks do we get, that is the condition, right? So if the grace marks are if the grace marks required by any student are 20 or below 20, then and then we are going to perform this uh, updation. Otherwise this updation is not possible, because what window we have kept for the grace marks, it is 20 marks. So if a student is having marks as 20 or 21 or 25, then this updation will take place, or we are going to execute this trigger. Otherwise, it won't get executed. So if a student is having marks as 50, so we should not allow it. Understood this? So that sort of condition we are trying to put in. Understood? Fine. So in that case, what we have to do, we are going to, if this event occurs, right? In that case, what we are going to do, as an implication of this event, we are going to insert a record into the trig log table. What is this? Trigger log, right? We generally maintain, by using triggers, we maintain logs that at what change was made, at what point of time the change was made, right? So it allows us to maintain logs, and generally whoever has made the change, and at what point of time that change was made, all those things are getting logged in a particular table. So triggers are basically used for that purpose in database management system. Fine. So we are trying to do the same thing. So we are going to insert into this particular table. What we are going to insert? The roll number of the student. Whatever you insert, old dot roll or new dot roll, it doesn't matter because we haven't changed the roll number and the name. So even if you take old dot roll or old dot name, it is fine. I have taken here new dot roll and new dot name, right? So these two things, along with the marks difference, what the difference in marks is, right? That will be logged, and the sysdate function we have called. So we have four columns in this trig underscore log table. This one is for roll number, one for name, the difference in marks, and the date at date and yeah, the date at which the changes are being made. Understood? And then we have end our procedure, I mean the action section. Fine. And we have terminated the statement of creating triggers. Clear with this? I mean, broadly the idea must be clear about how to create a trigger, isn't it? So I have just a minute. I have created a trigger for the same sake, which is applied on the result table. Just a minute. So if I show triggers, yeah, I have a single trigger over here. Uh, yes. So I'm doing the same thing. If you're able to see my prompt over here, my MySQL prompt, I haven't specified the if condition. So what it will do, it will just a minute. Yeah. So what it will do, we have a variable marks diff of integer type. It will compute the difference of marks for each of the row, and once it computes the difference for each of the row, at the same time it will it will perform an insert operation on the trig underscore log table, and it will put in these values that we have discussed: the roll number, name, difference of marks, and sysdate. So definitely, uh, for each of the row, if we are going to compute the difference, here we have to mention a condition that we saw, the if condition, right? And then you will perform the insert operation. Otherwise there won't be any insertion into the trig log table. Fine. If we go to print the trig log table for now, select from underscore log. Yeah, I am having certain entries, but basically These entries are being made because I performed some operation. I executed this particular trigger for, uh, I think I executed it many times. So firstly, we'll have to clear this, and then, for example, if I try to update the result table again, so I'll do the updation, update results set uh, total marks equal to 40, where total marks is less than 40. Understood? So what I'm doing, I'm trying to update the result table, and in order to do that, what I'm trying to do with the updation, I'm going to update the total marks column and put in a value of 40. For which rows? For those rows or for those students whose total marks is less than 40. So it says that three rows got affected, and rightly so, because if you observe this result table, marks below 40 are in three rows. That is for roll number 12, roll number 19, and roll number 20. Understood? So if we again select, so you'll observe that in the result table now all the total marks have got updated to the 40, right? I think others were already 40. Yeah, roll number 5, 7, and 18 were already 40. Those can be any other marks which are greater than 40, obviously. But if the marks were less than 20, it got updated, right? And if I try to select from the log table, yeah. So the last three entries that you can see in this trig underscore log table, which are for roll number 12, 19, and 20, whose marks got updated. And what is the difference of the marks? It is 20, isn't it? Earlier, the marks for these roll number 12, 19, and 20 were 20, and we updated it to 40. So the difference will be stored in our trig underscore log table. So the difference is uh, 20, and we are storing it in a column called as grace marks, so that is fine. And more importantly, the date at which the updation took place uh, is also getting stored over here, so that uh, at what point of time these marks were updated, we can keep track of that.